So, Module 2 is all about cities, how they're built, and what their future kind of looks like, and how people predict their future. The first resource, Urbanization, how cities start and grow, talks about why they start where they start, and a lot of the times that's due to city ports or major transportation lines. It also talks about the centric model, which we see a little bit deeper in the 7 Urban Cities resource. The centric model is where the center of the city is where it is most popular, and then it kind of grows out where you see the wealthy areas and then the poor areas and then the factories and whatnot. It kind of like grows out from there. So that kind of brought an interesting idea to me, because in the conclusion of Urban Utopias in the 20th century, that book, we see how it starts in the center and then there's kind of a lot of decay and then you get to the wealthy areas. I think a big part of that is that transportation has grown, and transportation is a huge part in the transformation of cities. We see that in the resource how cities are organized. Transportation is the biggest key in changing cities, which makes sense when we see that decay, because the wealthier people can now drive back and forth, so they don't have to stay in the areas that are getting filled up and dirty and with the noise pollution and whatnot. Moving on, there are 3 main ways that the people assumed that cities were going to grow. Well, 3 people. There was 3 guys: Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier, and Bauhaus. And we see a video kind of what that looks like in the video called Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier, and Bauhaus in Urban Planning. The most interesting one to me was Le Corbusier, because his was very different from what the other 2 were thinking, where they were very much, oh, let's make it sprawled out, let's kind of decentralize everything. And his was more of, we'll stay central and just build up. His ideas also, so I saw a lot about him in the additional resource art and architecture. Le Corbusier was what the video was called, and he was just very minimalist, which I thought was interesting because we see that a lot today, I think, where his ideas stood the most and are used the most, because nowadays we see very modernistic buildings have less features, less decoration, which is something that Le Corbusier was really into. The main opposition to the ideal cities, as they were called, which these 3 guys were really into, was Jane Jacobs. We see a video at her called Remembering Jane Jacobs, and I agree with her. She just thought that cities were way too complex to follow along with what they were saying, and they were suggesting that, oh, you can just like uproot the city and remove all this. But what they're not thinking about is how those places they're uprooting, all those slums, it's not just a slum, it's a community, it's people, and they don't just want their lives stripped away from them. I also think that it's a weird way of thinking of cities. Sphinx chapter 7 talks about it as well, because it kind of gets rid of a lot of things. Sphinx specifically talks about how it isolates women. It was kind of like people thought that female independence shouldn't be used, and that was kind of brought up in these ideal cities. And they ignored what people wanted, which I think is clear if you look at, if you were to go to those slums, and a lot of the what they consider slums is more like ethnic neighborhoods, I think, and those people aren't sad. I would say those people are often happier than what you see in the higher, wealthier communities. So suggesting this ideal neighborhood is it's a very utopian idea, and I think that, you see a lot of books and movies written all about how this utopia is a miserable place where people don't have the freedom to choose things and do things. There was one guy who also talked about it, Sennett. He was opposed to the idea. I think he went a little farther. He suggested no city services or no government. I disagree with that. I think one of the things, I'm using an outside resource here, but there's a verse in the Bible, 2 Samuel chapter 8, verses 4 through 6 kind of talks about how Israel had no king, and then they started asking, they wanted the leader at the time, or not leader, but the prophet at the time. They said, give us a king, we want a king, we want a king. And it kind of goes with the idea that, like, people want someone to lead them. A lot of the times they don't want to have to make decisions, because if they're made their own decisions, like, people aren't always going to make the right decision. And when there's no law to lead them, they kind of, it doesn't take much for a bad person to do a bad thing, and then not have any consequences. There was some positive things that I also saw, not from the ideal cities, but just looking into the future and being a planner. The World Fair was a really good representation of that. We saw that in that video. I mean, you just get to see, that's more though technological advances, and where you get to see, like, not like, oh, this is what we plan for the future, but this is what we have that you could have in the future once we make more of them. So like that television and the automotive mobiles. We saw another, so the General Motor exhibit showed, which I thought was really cool, this like stove that didn't heat up, which was kind of interesting to me because I haven't seen that. I didn't know that was a thing. So it's interesting because it's like, I wonder why that wasn't really actually brought into the future. And it's kind of cool seeing, like, oh, I know that. Oh, I've seen that stuff, like the like diesel engines and all the cars and the television and the color photos, but then some of the stuff didn't. I think that how planners refocus their thinking to incorporate the future into planning does a good job showing what we should be thinking about if we're planners, which is prevention rather than planning a specific future. Planning a specific future means choosing one outcome out of an infinite, while if we're preventing something, that's a lot easier to say, hey, we just want to find a way to specifically stop this from happening, rather than, hey, we want to make specifically this happen. The trend report from 2026 shows AI and how it's manipulating humans. I think that that's something that we should prevent, and we should find a way to start incorporating laws and stop certain things from happening. I think AI has just grown way too fast for us to be able to control it, and I think we need to start setting up barriers. And that's my opinion on Module 2.